today of Al Armendariz from the EPA for his comments against gas and energy companies and crucifying them. And he resigned at the time that he was called on the carpet by the media regarding it. The White House backed off and put him under the bus as far as I could venture a look. What I'm asking is that will any oversight committee such as Darrell Iss's or perhaps another oversight committee still continue what the EPA is doing in the light of what Armendariz said that day a couple of years ago?
Yes, in fact, I went to Chairman Issa last week and showed him the video. Not so much, I mean, that was egregious, but, and everyone, I don't care what side of the alley you're on, can say that's egregious and that was, ridiculous what he was saying. But that's the tone. That is, unfortunately, that whole tone permeates the EPA, it permeates a lot of the government agencies. And what I hear from the small businesses here are, they'll say, they don't want to help me comply, they want to punish me. And that's a very, I think years ago, the government agencies, whether it was state or federal, were more inclined to help a small business to become compliant with whatever the regulation was. And now we're hearing there isn't a whole lot of help or suggestions or trying to figure it out. There's more you get punished, you get a fine slapped on you, and you, similar to what he was saying. But what we hear from a lot of the agencies, and oversight and government reform is a pretty, I enjoy the committee because it really you have the opportunity to hold government agencies accountable. So we've had the EPA in about standards for cars. We've had OSHA in, we've had the Department of Labor in, we've had HHS in, we've had Eric Holder in, and we've had the opportunity to question these folks. And what impresses me about so many of the agencies and so many of the regulators, and the regulators are, I think, a problem because the regulators are not elected, they're not accountable, they don't even have to show their face, most of them, they're behind in a room writing regulation. The problem is, like we've had hearings on boiler mac, cement mac, regulations that the EPA has put out that will really cripple some of these industries, cripple the coal industry, cripple boilers and the standards for them, and or the mileage requirements. What's impressive about these folks who come in and testify is that they've never worked in that business, or they've never owned a business. They don't understand what these regulations are going to do to that small business or to that industry. And there's almost a certain amount of arrogance. And probably never, I think this isn't something I want to blame on this administration. This is something that has been just progressing over the years as government has gotten bigger, as government has become less accountable. There's this arrogance like, well, we're the federal government. Well, the federal government is all of you. You fund that mess down there, and you pay their salaries, and it's very impressive to me that they're arrogant about, Eric Holder was probably the most arrogant one I've had, as a witness there to testify, but they don't think they should be accountable, and that's a problem. That's when government's gotten too big, and that's when government has no regard for the people. And that's my concern with this environment as we see it now. And this person, and he did resign today, which was a good thing. That's just, I think, a symptom of a much bigger problem. This attitude about, well, I have to mention GSA. $800,000. Now, in the whole scheme of the government's money, $800,000 is pittance, except for it's $800,000 of your money, of your hard-earned tax dollars. And there's just no rhyme or reason why they spent it, why they were such arrogance. And again, it goes back to this unaccountability. And you have the GSA, you have Secret Service, you just had these instances. And I say to myself, how do we ever justify raising taxes until we get that mess under control? It isn't a Republican or Democratic issue. It is an issue of this government has more duplicative programs. There's more waste. There's more slush funds kicking around. That until we get that in order, I don't think we can ever even begin to discuss raising taxes. We can't do it. It's a travesty. And we've got to, this tax code is another issue, and you go back to, and we talk a lot about these days about fairness. Well, it's not fair. It's not fair to take hard-earned taxpayer dollars and fund this mess down in Washington that's unaccountable to the American people. That's not fair. And that's where we've got to start. Really, government needs to be reformed. And that's not a Republican or a Democratic issue. Government needs to be reformed. It's a mess. It really is a mess. And these bureaucrats, and you go down there, many of you have been down there, these buildings, whether it's Department of Education, they're not doing good for our schools, the Department of Education. And I digress, and we'll get back to questions. If they were doing a good job, you could almost justify it, but they're not. And when I talk to some of the school districts, this race for the top that's costing billions of dollars, Auburn's superintendent said to me, they gave us $7,000. The upstate schools in our district really take a hit. They don't get the formulas that they apply for this money. The downstate schools do much, much better than our schools do. But they gave the Auburn superintendent this, he said they gave me $7,000 to unroll this whole Race to the Top program. He said, I can't even hire a part-time teacher for that amount of money. And yet I'm asked to comply with this whole big program. We were in a meeting on Saturday, a teacher from Cato Meridian said, he said, they just don't know what's good for Cato Meridian down in Washington. It should be a state and a local issue. And it would make public education better. It would make it more local. And it certainly would, I think, leave the schools with more money, the school districts with more money without feeding this big beast down in Washington. Those are controversial. Those are controversial topics. They're thinking outside of how we've done business for a long time. But those are the discussions we have to have when we talk about government reform. There has to be a willingness to think outside of the box. Because until and unless we do, and I'll tell you, my own party is guilty of the same thing. You go down there and you meet politicians who've been there a long time, and you say to them, how come you're doing it this way? Why don't you do it this way? Well, that's just the way it's always been done. That's the status quo. Don't make waves, and that's a problem. Government really does need to be reformed.
Tom Hanley, Fulton.
Hello. I've got a question about taxing, and this is an issue with me. Just as background, 10% of earners pay 71% of the taxes, but what you never seem to mention is they're all paying virtually historically low tax rates. There's just a lot of rich people paying very little individually. That's the spin that you don't, that's the truth that you don't hear when the spin is given. Very, very low tax rates for the rich, lowest there's been. But my question regarding that is, you don't seem to want to raise a nickel of revenue to help fight the deficits and debt by taxing rich people. I know you said we punish the rich. So they'll still be rich, believe me, if we raise the rate by about 4.6%. But I guess you oppose the Buffett rule, the Buffett-Reagan rule, which would have had a minimum tax for people that get the bulk of their earnings from what do you call capital gains. My question is, why is it, and I do not understand this seriously, that whenever it's cutting a program that helps the poor, the middle class, or women, dimes are important. Cutting Planned Parenthood funding, which would devastate that agency, that company. What about cutting Pell Grants, cutting those things, which are peanuts, even cutting food stamps, which is what Republicans have proposed again recently in the height of this deep recession we're still getting out of it. Why is it as peanuts when it's raising taxes, but it's a gigantic savings when you cut the small amounts? The Buffett-Reagan rule, if it was passed, would have covered all those things that you want to cut that affect, average working people, men, women, the poor, the middle class. Why is it when we cut these things, you want to cut them, it's like we're saving a fortune, which we're not, on a federal budget. And when we want to raise money, it's always, we're not going to raise enough if we tax it. No one ever claimed, by the way, that we would balance the budget by taxing the wealthy. That's a strong one. No one ever suggested taxing 100% of their wealth. We're talking about minor tax increases on the rich to help pay for the things that average working people. This is why, I'm sorry, that you get characterized as being either working
What's the question?
Why is it peanuts when it's
All the question.
why is it peanuts when you're taxing the rich?
Ask the question.
The question is, why is it why is it peanuts when we're trying to raise money by taxing the rich, but cutting programs that amount to very little in the federal budget is really important.
Filibuster. Must up my hair.
First of all, Tom, did you know that the new district, you're going to be now in the new district? Finally, you're going to be a constituent.
Yeah, I do. It's freedom of speech.
Don't answer for that.
First of all, the Buffett rule is, I think, a farce. I apologize, but the money, the revenues that we'd be generated from the Buffett rule is 46.
It would save the cuts you wanted to make in Planned Parenthood, Pell Grants, and
Warren Buffett, this whole thing with Warren Buffett is really ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Do you know how much in back taxes that guy owes? What he does is, and it's this class warfare. It is this class warfare. It is pitting classes of people. I think every American should pay their fair share of taxes. The rich are paying, the top 10% are paying 71% of the taxes.
Record low tax rates. Am I wrong about that? They pay record low tax rates.
He's already had his say. You got him up.
All right, no, that's fine. But I don't think it accomplishes, and the rhetoric, the war on woman, or the cuts here and the cuts there. Look, we have got to get our spending under control in this nation. You can roll your eyes, Tom, but until we stop spending money that we don't have, we're operating at a deficit every year of $1.2 trillion every year. The debt right now is close to $16 trillion. Somehow, we can't raise that through taxes. If we confiscate their wealth, we can't raise that.
I said that. No one says that. No one. You're giving a straw man argument. No one ever said to do that and fails at all.
No, nobody ever said it. I'm just saying that if we confiscate, even if we don't raise their taxes, if we take all their wealth, it's only $1 trillion. So somewhere else, we've got to come up with a solution. And this country is a caring, generous country, and no one should go without food or shelter. We're a wealthy country, and that shouldn't happen. But I think, and this is again controversial, and it's changing the discussion a little bit. I think this country has created through its policies an entitlement mentality.